decided to go down to see Helen Stoner at home, see if they can work out what the problem is, and if they can do anything to help her. And in the meantime, Holmes is going off to Doctor's Commons in order to find some information about the stepfather, who is already a murderer. He beat one of his servants to death in India. This is a matter of record. He did time for it. This is not out of the blue. Oh, is Twitch back? Please tell me Twitch is back. I'll tell you what, actually. I've just started the local recording. So, should this go south, what I will do is I will carry on with the reading and then I can upload it. And we can all get in on this. Yeah, doesn't know his own strength. Ha ha, yeah. Right. Coffee. If I am back in the room, I will finish this story this evening and then make a decision as to whether or not I stream Baldur's Gate as well.
Thank you for the gift here in Cork.
Hello, that went wrong. I can drink like a human.
Thanks to the sub chrono magistrate.
More like couldn't stop himself from murder. Yeah. Very much. Oh, I love how random gift subs work. Actually, thank you for subbing to Pando because I can now do stuff. Possibly. Okay. It was nearly 1 o'clock when Sherlock Holmes returned from his excursion. He held in his hand a sheet of blue paper scrawled over with notes and figures. "I've seen the will of the deceased wife," said he. "To determine its exact meaning, I've been obliged to work out the present prices of the investments with which it is concerned. The total income, which at the time of the wife's death was little short of £1,100, is now, through the falling agricultural prices, not more than £750. Each daughter can claim an income of £250 in case of marriage. It is evident, therefore, that if both the girls had married, this beauty would have had a mere pittance, while even one of them would cripple him to a very serious extent. My morning's work has not been wasted, since it is proved that he has the very strongest of motives for standing in the way of anything of the sort. And now, Watson, this is too serious for dawdling, especially as the old man is aware that we are interesting ourselves in his affairs. So, if you're ready, we shall call a cab and drive to Waterloo. I should be very much obliged if you would slip your revolver into your pocket, and Neely's number 2 is an excellent argument with gentlemen who can twist steel pokers into knots. That and a toothbrush are, I think, all we need." At Waterloo, we were fortunate in catching a train for Leatherhead, where we hired a trap at the station inn and drove for 4 or 5 miles through the lovely Surrey lanes. It was a perfect day, with a bright sun and a few fleecy clouds in the heavens. The trees and wayside hedges were just throwing out their first green shoots, and the air was full of the pleasant smell of the moist earth. To me, at least, there was a strange contrast between the sweet promise of the spring and this sinister quest upon which we were engaged. My companion sat in front of the trap, his arms folded, his hat pulled down over his eyes, and his chin sunk upon his breast, buried in the deepest thought. Suddenly, however, he started, tapped me on the shoulder, and pointed over the meadows. "Look there," said he. A heavily timbered park stretched up in the gentle slope, thickening into a grove at the highest point. From amid the branches there jutted out the grey gables and high roof-tree of a very old mansion. "Stoke Moran?" said he. "Yes, sir, that be the house of Dr. Grimsby Roylott," remarked the driver. "There's some building going on there," said Holmes. "That's where we're going." "There's the village," said the driver, pointing to a cluster of roofs some distance to the left. "But if you want to get to the house, you'll find it shorter to get over this stile, and so by the footpath over the fields. There it is, where the lady is walking." "And the lady I fancy is Miss Stoner," observed Holmes, shading his eyes. "Yes, I think we'd better do as you suggest." We got off, paid our fare, and the trap rattled back on its way to Leatherhead. "I thought it as well," said Holmes, as we climbed the stile, "that this fellow should think we had come here as architects or on some definite business. It may stop his gossip. Good afternoon, Miss Stoner. You see that we have been as good as our word." Oh, no. Right, the connection does seem to have stabilised now, if that helps. Don't mess with me. Twitch. As I said, I'm recording this, so I will upload the clean recording. And that will probably be the version that goes to YouTube as well. Thank you very much, Hiram, for clarifying that. This is looking less and less likely, though, that I'll be able to game stream later. It's fine. Okay. And hello, Lexi. Indeed, hello, everybody. I apologise for not being as greety as I would normally be. Okay. Our client of the morning had hurried forward to meet us with a face which spoke her joy. "I've been waiting so eagerly for you," she cried, shaking hands with us warmly. "All has turned out splendidly. Dr. Roylott's gone to town, and it's unlikely he will be back before evening." "We have had the pleasure of making the doctor's acquaintance," said Holmes, and in a few words he sketched out what had occurred. Miss Stoner turned white to the lips as she listened. "Good heavens!" she cried. "He has followed me, then?" "So it appears." "He's so cunning that I never know when I'm safe from him. What will he say when he returns?" "He must guard himself, for he may find that there is someone more cunning than himself upon his track. You must lock yourself up from him tonight. If he is violent, we shall take you away to your aunt's at Harrow. Now, we must make the best use of our time, so kindly take us at once to the rooms which we are to examine." The building was of grey, lichen-blotched stone, with a high central portion and two curving wings like the claws of a crab thrown out on either side. In one of these wings the windows were broken and blocked with wooden boards, while the roof was partially caved in, a picture of ruin. The central portion was in little better repair, but the right-hand block was comparatively modern, and the blinds in the windows, with the blue smoke curling up from the chimneys, showed that this was where the family resided. Some scaffolding had been erected against the end wall, and the stonework had been broken into, but there were no signs of any workmen at the moment of our visit. Holmes walked slowly up and down the ill-trimmed lawn and examined with deep attention the outsides of the windows. "This, I take it, belongs to the room in which you used to sleep, the centre one to your sister's, and the one next to the main building to Dr. Roylott's chamber." "Exactly so, but I'm now sleeping in the middle one." "Pending the alterations, as I understand. By the way, there does not seem to be any very pressing need for repairs at that end wall." "There were none. I believed that it was an excuse to move me from my room." "Ah, that is suggestive. Now, on the other side of this narrow wing runs the corridor from which these three rooms open. There are windows in it, of course." "Yes, but very small ones, too narrow for anyone to pass through." "As you both locked your doors at night, your rooms were unapproachable from that side. Now, would you have the kindness to go into your room and bar your shutters?" Miss Stoner did so, and Holmes, after a careful examination through the open window, endeavoured in every way to force the shutter open, but without success. There was no slit through which a knife could be passed to raise the bar. Then with his lens he tested the hinges, but they were of solid iron, built firmly into the massive masonry. "Said he, scratching his chin in some perplexity. My theory certainly presents some difficulties. No one could pass these shutters if they were bolted. Well, we shall see if the inside throws any light upon the matter. Ouch, Crow. Yes, that I can see playing silly buggers with your data. I hope that at least a chunk of this is coming through. Please, 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 please. A small side door led into the whitewashed corridor from which the 3 bedrooms opened. Holmes refused to examine the 3rd chamber, so he passed at once to the 2nd, that in which Miss Stoner was now sleeping, and in which her sister had met with her fate. It was a homely little room, with a low ceiling and a gaping fireplace, after the fashion of old country houses. A brown chest of drawers stood in one corner, a narrow white counterpaned bed in another, and a dressing table on the left-hand side of the window. These articles, with 2 small wicker-work chairs, made up all the furniture in the rooms, save for a square of Wilton carpet in the centre. She had a rug, basically. The boards round and the panelling of the walls were of brown, worm-eaten oak, so old and discoloured they may have dated from the original building of the house. Holmes drew one of the chairs into a corner and sat silent, while his eyes travelled round and round and up and down, taking in every detail of the apartment. "Where does that bell communicate with?" he asked at last, pointing to a thick bell rope which hung down beside the bed, the tassel actually lying upon the pillow. "It goes to the housekeeper's room." "It looks newer than the other things." "Yes, it was only put there a couple of years ago." "Your sister asked for it, I suppose?" "No, I never heard of her using it. We used always to get what we wanted for ourselves." "Indeed, it seemed unnecessary to put so nice a bell-pull there. You will excuse me for a few minutes while I satisfy myself as to this floor." He threw himself down upon his face with his lens in his hand and crawled swiftly backward and forward, examining minutely the cracks between the boards. Then he did the same with the woodwork with which the chamber was panelled. Finally he walked over to the bed and spent some time staring at it, and in running his eye up and down the wall. Finally he took the bell-rope in his hand and gave it a brisk tug. "Why, it's a dummy," said he. "Won't it ring?" "No, it's not even attached to a wire. This is very interesting. You can see now that it is fastened to a hook just above where the little opening for the ventilator is." "How very absurd! I never noticed that before." "Very strange," muttered Holmes, pulling at the rope. "There are 1 or 2 very singular points about this room. For example, what a fool the builder must be to open a ventilator into another room, when, with the same trouble, he might have communicated with the outside air." "That also is quite modern," said the lady. "Done about the same time as the bell-rope," remarked Holmes. "Yes, there were several little changes carried out about that time." "They seem to have been of a most interesting character. Dummy bell-ropes and ventilators which do not ventilate. With your permission, Miss Stoner, we shall now carry out researches into the inner apartment." "Oh!" And thank you for the gift sub there. Okay. Dr. Grimesby Roylott's chamber was larger than that of his stepdaughter, but was as plainly furnished. A camp bed, a small wooden shelf full of books, mostly of a technical character, an armchair beside the bed, a plain wooden chair against the wall, a round table, and a large iron safe were the principal things which met the eye. Holmes walked slowly round and examined each and all of them with the keenest interest. "What's in here?" he asked, tapping the safe. "My stepfather's business papers." "Oh, you've seen inside, then?" "Only once, some years ago. I remember that it was full of papers." "There isn't a cat in it, for example?" "No. What a strange idea." "Well, look at this." He took up a small saucer of milk which stood on top of it. "No, we don't keep a cat, but there's a cheetah and a baboon." Ah, yes, of course. Well, the cheetah is just a big cat, and yet a saucer of milk does not go very far in satisfying its wants, I dare say. There is one point which I should wish to determine. He squatted down in front of the wooden chair and examined the seat of it with the greatest of attention. "Thank you, that is quite settled," said he, rising and putting his lens in his pocket. "Hello, here's something interesting." The object which had caught his eye was a small dog lash hung upon one corner of the bed. The lash, however, was curled upon itself and tied so as to make a loop of whipcord. "What do you make of that, Watson?" "It's a common enough lash, but I don't see why it should be tied." "Then it's not quite so common, is it? Ah, me. It's a wicked
I'm
world, and
hungry.
when a clever man turns his brains to crime, it's the worst of all. I think that I've seen enough now, Miss Stoner, and with your permission we shall walk out upon the lawn." I had never seen my friend's face so grim, or his brow so dark as it was when we turned from the scene of this investigation. We had walked several times up and down the lawn, neither Miss Stoner nor myself liking to break in upon his thoughts before he roused himself from his reverie. "It is very essential, Miss Stoner," said he, "that you should absolutely follow my advice in every respect." "I shall most certainly do so." "The matter is too serious for any hesitation. Your life may depend upon your compliance." "I assure you that I am in your hands." "In the first place, both my friend and I must spend the night in your room." Both Miss Stoner and I gazed at him in astonishment. "Yes, it must be so. Let me explain. I believe that is the village inn over there." "Yes, that is the Crown." "Very good. Your windows would be visible from there." "Certainly." "You must confine yourself to your room on pretence of a headache when your stepfather comes back. Then, when you hear him retire for the night, you must open the shutters of your window, undo the hasp, put your lamp there as a signal to us, and then withdraw quietly with everything which you are likely to want into the room which you used to occupy. I have no doubt that in spite of the repairs you might manage there for one night." "Oh, yes, easily." "The rest you will leave in our hands." "But what will you do?" "We shall spend the night in your room, and we shall investigate the cause of this noise which has disturbed you." "I believe, Mr. Holmes, that you've already made up your mind," said Miss Stoner, laying her hand upon my companion's sleeve. "Perhaps I have." "Then for pity's sake tell me what was the cause of my sister's death." "I should prefer to have clearer proofs before I speak. You can at least tell me whether my own thought is correct, and if she died from some sudden fright." "No, I don't think so. I think that there was probably some more tangible cause. And now, Miss Stoner, we must leave you, for if Dr. Roylott returned and saw our journey would be in vain. Goodbye, and be brave, for if you will do what I have told you, you may rest assured that we shall soon drive away the dangers that threaten you." Yes, brief break there for an actual Kofi shout-out. Let's see if this works, because why on earth would anything want to connect? Really? Please, keyboard. I am not impressed. Do not mess with me. Yes, okay, kofi.com/Druttercup is where it's most efficient to support me if you are of a mind to. And thank you, Alexia, for actually reminding me of that. Ah, me. Please work, I beg of thee. Fine. So, what do you reckon so far? I imagine that there are several of you quite familiar with the Holmes pantheon already. You don't sound... Oh, thank you for the attempt, Hiram. Unfortunately, that is not having it. Right, okay, so... Please talk to Drutty, computer. I think because it's losing the connection so badly, I think it's having a bit of a turn when it tries to do Bluetooth, and my keyboard's Bluetooth. So that's fun. Sus room, you say? Yes, very much. Absolutely a sus room. Okay. Sherlock Holmes and I had no difficulty in engaging a bedroom and sitting room at the Crown Inn. They were on the upper floor, and from our window we could command a view of the avenue gate and of the inhabited wing of Stoke Moran Manor House. At dusk we saw Dr. Grimesby Roylott drive past, his huge form looming up beside the little figure of the lad who drove him. The boy had some slight difficulty in undoing the heavy iron gates, and we heard the hoarse roar of the doctor's voice, and saw the fury with which he shook his clenched fist at him. The trap drove on, and a few minutes later we saw a sudden light spring up among the trees as the lamp was lit in one of the sitting rooms. "Do you know, Watson," said Holmes, as we sat together in the gathering darkness, "I really have some scruples as to taking you tonight. There's a distinct element of danger." "Can I be of assistance?" "Your presence might be invaluable." "Then I shall certainly come." "It's very kind of you." "You speak of danger. You've evidently seen more in these rooms than was visible to me." "No, but I fancy that I may have deduced a little more. I imagine that you saw all that I did." "I saw nothing remarkable save the bell rope, and what purpose that could answer I confess is more than I can imagine." "You saw the ventilator too?" "Yes, but I don't think it's such a very unusual thing to have a small opening between two rooms. It was so small that a rat could hardly pass through." "I knew that we should find a ventilator before ever we came to Stoke Moran." "My dear Holmes!" "Oh, yes, I did. You remember in her statement she said that her sister could smell Dr. Roylott's cigar. Now, of course, that suggested at once that there must be communication between the two rooms. It could only be a small one, or it would have been remarked upon at the coroner's inquiry. I deduced a ventilator." "But what harm can there be in that?" "Well, there is at least a curious coincidence of dates. A ventilator is made, a cord is hung, and the lady who sleeps in the bed dies. Does that not strike you?" "I cannot as yet see any connection." "Did you observe anything very peculiar about that bed?" "No." "It was clamped to the floor. Did you ever see a bed fastened like that before?" "I cannot say that I have." "The lady could not move her bed. It must always be in the same relative position to the ventilator and to the rope, or so we may call it, since it was clearly never meant for a bell pull." "Holmes," I cried, "I seem to see dimly what you're hinting at. We're only just in time to prevent some subtle and horrible crime." "Subtle enough and horrible enough. When a doctor does go wrong, he's the first of criminals. He has nerve and he has knowledge. Palmer and Pritchard were among the heads of their profession. This man strikes even deeper, but I think, Watson, that we shall be able to strike deeper still. But we shall have horrors enough before the night is over. For goodness' sake, let us have a quiet pipe and turn our minds for a few hours to something more cheerful." About 9 o'clock, the light among the trees was extinguished, and all was dark in the direction of the manor house. 2 hours passed slowly away, and then, suddenly, just at the stroke of 11, a single bright light shone out right in front of us. "That is our signal," said Holmes, springing to his feet. "It comes from the middle window." As we passed out, he exchanged a few words with the landlord, explaining that we were going on a late visit to an acquaintance, and that it was possible we might spend the night there. A moment later we were out on the dark road, a chill wind blowing in our faces, and one yellow light twinkling in front of us through the gloom to guide us on our sombre errand. There was little difficulty in entering the grounds, for unrepaired breaches gaped in the old park wall. Making our way among the trees, we reached the lawn, crossed it, and were about to enter through the window when out from a lump of laurel bushes there darted what seemed to be a hideous and distorted child, who threw itself upon the grass with writhing limbs, and then ran swiftly across the lawn into the darkness. "My God!" I whispered. "Did you see it?" Holmes was for the moment as startled as I. His hand closed like a vice upon my wrist in his agitation. Then he broke into a low laugh and put his lips to my ear. "It's a nice household," he murmured. "That is the baboon." I had forgotten the strange pets which the doctor affected. There was a cheetah, too. Perhaps we might find it on our shoulders at any moment. I confess that I felt easier in my mind when, after following Holmes's example and slipping off my shoes, I found myself inside the bedroom. My companion noiselessly closed the shutters, moved the lamp onto the table, and cast his eyes around the room. All was as we had seen in the daytime. Then, creeping up to me and making a trumpet of his hand, he whispered into my ear again so gently that it was all I could do to distinguish the words. "The least sound would be fatal to our plans." I nodded to show that I had heard. "We must sit without light. He would see it through the ventilator." I nodded again. "Do not go asleep. Your very life may depend upon it. Have your pistol ready in case we should need it. I will sit on the side of the bed, and you in that chair." I took out my revolver and laid it on the corner of the table. Holmes had brought up a long thin cane, and this he placed upon the bed beside him. By it he laid out the box of matches and the stump of a candle. Then he turned down the lamp, and we were left in darkness. Yeah, absolutely. Agatha Christie, I think, did nursing at one point. Yeah. Anyone who has professional knowledge of how to fix people also has knowledge of how to break them. And also what's likely to have been looked for. Okay, thank you very much, Vila Katzen. I will be uploading this to the VOD, as I said. So hopefully that will all go through okay. Hey ho. Give me a mo. Right, okay. Do you ever feel completely picked on by tech? I'm just wondering if it's just me. There's a story of where someone recognised thallium poisoning as a child because they'd read one of Christie's novels. That vaguely rings a bell, actually. Yes, I think so. I tell you what, guys, when you lose internet connection, you have no idea how much else in Windows depends upon it.
Welcome, Coffee Stream Bot.
And I will be chopping this bit out. Sheesh. Right. I'm vaguely amazed my headset's working. Oh, all praise to Coffee Stream Bot. Actually, what I am going to do is Techie I don't think has the bandwidth to work. So I will close her down and hopefully that will help the situation a bit. A lot of your random medical knowledge comes from Detective Conan. Okay. Not all of it accurate, but a lot. It's quite good when they put a decent degree of research in, isn't it? This is fine. Okay. Sorry, that's just gone. I accidentally Right, there we go. Sorry. Yes, morbidly accurate stuff's quite fun. Right. The least sound would be fatal to our plans. I nodded to show that I had heard. We must sit without light. He would see it through the ventilator. I nodded again. Do not go asleep. Your very life may depend upon it. Have your pistol ready in case we should need it. I will sit on the side of the bed and you in that chair. I took out my revolver and laid it on the corner of the table. Oh, there we go. Hang on. Holmes had brought up a long thin cane, and this he placed upon the bed beside him. By it he laid the box of matches and the stump of a candle. Then he turned down the lamp, and we were left in darkness. How shall I ever forget that dreadful vigil? I could not hear a sound, not even the drawing of a breath, and yet I knew that my companion sat open-eyed within a few feet of me, in the same state of nervous tension in which I was myself. The shutters cut off the least ray of light, and we waited in absolute darkness. From outside came the occasional cry of a night bird, and once at our very window a long-drawn cat-like whine, which told us that the cheetah was indeed at liberty. Far away we could hear the deep tones of the parish clock, which boomed out every quarter of an hour. How long they seemed, those quarters! 12 struck, and 1, and 2, and 3, and still we sat waiting silently for whatever might befall. Suddenly there was a momentary gleam of a light up in the direction of the ventilator, which vanished immediately, but was succeeded by a strong smell of burning oil and heated metal. Someone in the next room had lit a dark lantern. I heard a gentle sound of movement, and then all was silent once more, though the smell grew stronger. For half an hour I sat with straining ears. Then suddenly another sound became audible, a very gentle, soothing sound like that of a small jet of steam escaping continually from a kettle. The instant we heard it, Holmes sprang from the bed, struck a match, and lashed furiously with his cane at the bell pull. "You see it, Watson?" he yelled. "You see it?" But I saw nothing. At the moment when Holmes struck the light, I heard a low, clear whistle, but the sudden glare flashing into my weary eyes made it impossible for me to tell what it was which my friend lashed at so savagely. I could, however, see that his face was deathly pale and filled with horror and loathing. He had ceased to strike and was gazing up at the ventilator when suddenly there broke from the silence of the night the most horrible cry to which I have ever listened. It swelled up louder and louder, a hoarse yell of pain and fear and anger all mingled in one dreadful shriek. They say that away down in the village, and even in the distant parsonage, that cry raised the sleepers from their beds. It struck cold to our hearts, and I stood gazing at Holmes and he at me until the last echoes of it had died away into the silence from which it rose. "What can it mean?" I gasped. "It means that it is all over," Holmes answered, "and perhaps, after all, it is for the best. Take your pistol, and we will enter Dr. Roylott's room." With a grave face he lit the lamp and led the way down the corridor. Twice he struck at the chamber door without any reply from within. Then he turned the handle and entered, I at his heels, with the cocked pistol in my hand. It was a singular sight which met our eyes. On the table stood a dark lantern with the shutter half open, throwing a brilliant beam of light upon the iron safe, the door of which was ajar. Beside this table, on the wooden chair, sat Dr. Grimesby Roylott, clad in a long grey dressing gown, his bare ankles protruding beneath, and his feet thrust into red heelless Turkish slippers. Across his lap lay the short stock with the long lash which we had noticed during the day. His chin was cocked upward, and his eyes were fixed in a dreadful, rigid stare at the corner of the ceiling. Round his brow he had a peculiar yellow band with brownish speckles, which seemed to be bound tightly around his head. As we entered he made neither sound nor motion. "The band, the speckled band," whispered Holmes. I took a step forward. In an instant his strange headgear began to move, and there reared from itself from among his hair the squat diamond-shaped head and puffed neck of a loathsome serpent. "It's a swamp adder," cried Holmes. "The deadliest snake in India. He's died within 10 seconds of being bitten. Violence does, in truth, recoil upon the violent, and the schemer falls into the pit which he digs for another. Let us thrust this creature back into its den, and we can then remove Miss Stoner to some place of shelter, and let the county police know what has happened." As he spoke, he drew the dog whip swiftly from the dead man's lap, and throwing the noose around the reptile's neck, he drew it from its horrid perch, and carrying it at arm's length, threw it into the iron safe, which he closed upon it. Such are the true facts of the death of Dr. Grimesby Roylott of Stoke Moran. It's not necessary that I should prolong a narrative which has already run to too great a length, by telling how we broke the sad news to the terrified girl, how we conveyed her by the morning train to the care of her good aunt in Harrow, of how the slow process of official inquiry came to the conclusion that the doctor met his fate while indiscreetly playing with a dangerous pet. The little which I had yet to learn of the case was told me by Sherlock Holmes as we travelled back the next day. "I had," said he, "come to an entirely erroneous conclusion, which shows, my dear Watson, how dangerous it is to always reason from insufficient data. The presence of the gipsies, and the use of the word band, which was used by the poor girl, no doubt, to explain the appearance which she had caught a hurried glimpse of by the light of her match, was sufficient to put me on an entirely wrong scent. I can only claim the merit that I instantly reconsidered my position when, however, it became clear to me that whatever danger threatened an occupant of the room could not come either from the window or the door. My attention was speedily drawn, as I have already remarked to you, to this ventilator, and to the bell rope which hung down to the bed. The discovery that this was a dummy, and that the bed was clamped to the floor, instantly gave rise to the suspicion that the rope was there as a bridge for something passing through the hole and coming to the bed. The idea of a snake instantly occurred to me, and when I coupled it with my knowledge that the creature was furnished with a supply of creatures from India, I felt that I was probably on the right track. The idea of using a form of poison which could not possibly be discovered by any chemical test was just such a one as would occur to a clever and ruthless man who had had an Eastern training. The rapidity with which such a poison would take effect would also, from his point of view, be an advantage. It would be a sharp-eyed coroner indeed who could distinguish the 2 little dark punctures which would show where the poison fangs had done their work. Then I thought of the whistle. Of course he must recall the snake before the morning light revealed it to the victim. He had trained it, probably by the use of the milk which we saw, to return to him when summoned. He would put it through this ventilator at an hour that he thought best, with the certainty that it would crawl down the rope and land on the bed. It might or might not bite the victim, bite the occupant. Perhaps she might escape every night for a week, but sooner or later she must fall the victim. I had come to these conclusions before ever I had entered his room. An inspection of his chair showed me that he had been in the habit of standing on it, which of course would be necessary in order that he should reach the ventilator. The sight of the safe, the saucer of milk, and the loop of whipcord were enough to finally dispel any doubts which may have remained. The metallic clang heard by Miss Stoner was obviously caused by her stepfather hastily closing the door of his safe upon its terrible occupant. Having once made up my mind, you know the steps which I took in order to put the matter to the proof. I heard the creature hiss, as I have no doubt that you did also, and I instantly lit the light and attacked it, with the result of driving it through the ventilator, and also with the result of causing it to turn upon its master on the other side. Some of the blows of my cane came home, and roused its snakish temper, so that it flew upon the first person it saw. In this way I am no doubt indirectly responsible for Dr. Grimsby Roylott's death, and I cannot say that it is likely to weigh very heavily upon my conscience. Right, the end. So, what do you guys think? I know it's been up and down this evening. I will put the recording up. How was the reading, just out of curiosity? I have been practicing, embarrassingly. So I hope it wasn't too bad. Thank you. Trying to differentiate between Holmes and Watson in tone, that's an entertaining one. So, I have a choice, and I will also put this on the Discord. Next week, I can. Assuming that I have access to my computer properly, I can either go on and do another short story. God knows there are a lot. Or, if people are happy with it, I can start The Hound of the Baskervilles. A story which I am 90% sure most people have only encountered in adaptations, unless they've actually read the whole thing. And the adaptations never get it quite right. So, happy to hear what you guys think. If people are okay with me launching into a novel, then I am perfectly happy to do that, at the rate of probably a chapter a week, and see how that goes. Otherwise, as I said, I will go for another short story. You'd love to hear me read the bigger novels. I love Baskervilles. Study in Scarlet is a bit of a slog. It's fine up until the halfway point, and then a truckload of exposition just appears and lands on your head. My voice is relaxing. Oh, thank you for saying so, Alexia. Yeah, you get that massive exposition dump in A Study in Scarlet. And to a lesser extent in The Sign of Four. Which, I don't know why, Sign of Four doesn't quite do it for me. It's just one of those, there aren't many likeable characters. Although it does do one vital thing, which is set up Watson's first marriage. Because Watson, we know, is a babe and a ladies' man. You think we can start Hound? you've never seen the Wishbone adaptation of Hound of the Baskervilles, it's wild. I have seen so many adaptations of Hound of the Baskervilles. I think the dodgiest one was probably where the one of the BBC ones where Richard Roxburgh was Holmes. I don't know what they were doing in that. I honestly, not a clue. It was plot fine, plot fine, plot fine, screw up, rest of plot, whee! And that was just, what? I have no idea what you're doing. So yeah, very weird indeed. You think Sign of the Fall also introduces Holmes's cocaine habit? Yeah, I think quite possibly. Which would at least let me go off on one about the fact that I'm 90% sure he was being written as ADHD. Because cocaine doesn't do that. Cocaine puts him to sleep in the books. He relaxes on it. That's not what it does. Not what it does for your average person, anyway. And Conan Doyle, indeed, as a medical doctor, would have known how cocaine works. When I was younger, I assumed that it was just the author didn't know. And then when I grew up a bit and actually looked into Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, it was, oh, he is a medical doctor. And cocaine was commonly prescribed, as well as being a illicit pleasure. So he would have known exactly the effect it would have. And yeah, Holmes takes this major stimulant and goes to sleep. That's either a complete hiccup in the properties, or he's written this ADHD. And, it's letting him chill out. He was a medical doctor who was known to be at least really, really decent and passionate about his work. He was, yeah. Until he had his moment and flipped over into the whole spiritualism thing, he was absolutely rooted in logic, science and reality. Later on, he was rooted in logic, science and reality, but also with a deep-seated need to try and prove the existence of the afterlife. Yeah, he had his reasons. He had quite good reasons. So, thank you very much for putting up with my dodgy tech. It's like how you drink litres of black tea and all it does is make your brain work. Yeah, exactly. C.S. Lewis too, yes. Absolutely.
Nice to meet you.
Letters between C.S. Lewis and J.R. Tolkien are a scream, by the way. Good friends, coming at things from quite different directions. So if you ever get a chance to have a read of those, they are interesting. It's amazing how two erudite people can dance around each other without actually saying, you're wrong. I don't quite agree. It's like if I completely disagree with something and I really don't want to say it, you'll hear me go, yeah, kinda. It's wild comparing Lewis's Narnia versus his Perelandra, yeah. To my mind, if you're looking at the religious phase, Lewis's Screwtape Letters is absolutely brilliant. There was a very, very good audiobook reading. I'll have to check if it's on Audible, which was done by John Cleese. And that was excellent. That managed to produce a much better balance than the Narnia stuff, which went very weird by the end. And displayed some distinctly misogynistic tendencies, which I am not impressed about. So, I will see you definitely next Monday. My broadband ought to be fixed by Thursday, but frankly, I am not putting any money on it, so watch the Discord. And if I can stream, I will. What's really got me gutted is the fact that Alan Wake Lake House DLC releases this week, and I was hoping to do a release day stream. Well, that's not happening. You think Lewis had the Wheel of Time problem where he had to write more books than he first planned to. This is true. Unfortunately, I've had to put Techie to sleep this evening, Lexi. Because she was eating up a bit of bandwidth that could go elsewhere. Sorry about that. So, thank you very much. I will bid you a good night. And as I said, if you'd like to support the channel, you can chuck me a follow, which is appreciated. And you can also support me on ko-fi.com/Druttercup, where I am saving for an ADHD assessment. Wish me luck. Okay, that's lovely having you. And good night. Thank you.